All right, so welcome for those of us joining us tonight for this Green in the City event. My name is Joanna Kerr. I am a librarian with London Public Library. And thank you for answering our poll about where you are joining us from tonight. Feel free to share that in the chat if you've missed our poll. So we'll start tonight with, of course, a book talk, which is where I like to start things. We'll be looking at a book tonight that's published by World Watch Institute. So this book includes essays from experts from around the world who share profiles of cities that are putting sustainability into practice. It's available to borrow from London Public Library, and it's called Can a City Be Sustainable? So I will leave it there in terms of material that relates to our topic that you're able to borrow. But now I'm going to welcome Leah Derricks from the London Environmental Network to join us, and she'll share a territorial acknowledgement. Welcome, Leah.
Thanks, Joanna. Thanks to everyone who is joining us tonight. We'd like to start by acknowledging the history of the traditional territory and honor the longstanding relationships of the 3 local First Nations of this land and place in southwestern Ontario. The 3 longstanding Indigenous groups of this geographical region are the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lenape. We would also like to recognize the 3 First Nations communities downriver Deshkon-Zibi, also known as the Thames River and the Antler River, which are the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. We strive to work with these communities to continue to listen, learn, and restore the natural area back to its original beauty, as well as support environmental initiatives and help our communities become climate resilient. Thank you, and back to you, Joanna.
Thanks, Leah. Appreciate that. All right, so now we're going to start with our presentation tonight on the future of Masonville. We're looking at an introduction and opening remarks by our panel members, and then we'll be in conversation with Sonia Wise, Shawna Chambers, and John de Benedictis. Then we'll have our Q&A period, and we'll be able to take your questions and have some closing remarks. But we're going to start with another poll, and if you could indicate yes or no on this one. So this one is asking, have you heard of the Masonville Secondary Plan? So we'll launch this poll and have people just indicate if they have heard of it. And we'll certainly hear about it tonight, but just wanting to see, just get a sense from people. All right, I'm just looking at the results now, and it's about half and half. So about 57% have heard of the Masonville Secondary Plan, and now we're at 43 who haven't, and 57 who have. Okay, thanks for sharing that. All right, we'll just share those results. Perfect. Okay, thanks so much. And our next poll we'll go to is, just gonna go to the question here, and that is, have you been to the Green Energy Park behind TD's Masonville branch? So behind the Canada Trust Masonville branch is the TD Green Energy Park, and have you been there? And I'm just going to take a look. I think I closed my poll too early here, so I'm just going to bring it back up. Right. Okay, so we're getting 32% who have been to the Green Energy Park and 70% who haven't. So there's just such great stories from this park. You're going to really enjoy John's presentation. So we've got about 29 and 71. So we'll just share that with you so you can take a look. Yeah, so that's great. That's good to know. So about 70% have not been there. All right, our last question we're going to share is, and this is we're not trying to test your geographic knowledge, but do you know where Mesaville Creek is? Do you know where Mesaville Creek is? Okay, so it looks like we're getting more people who don't know where it is than do. So we're going to look at that tonight as well, and the role it plays in what we're talking about in terms of the future of Masonville. So yeah, about 29% do know where Mesaville Creek is. Great. Okay, well, thanks for that. It's nice to at least have some way to interact and hear from you when we're not able to see you or talk in any meaningful way. So thanks so much. Okay, so we've got those results as well. And so 29% versus 71 for Masonville Creek. Terrific. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll move into the introduction of our guests. We're going to start with Sonia Wise. Sonia has been with the City of London for 9 years and is a senior planner. Sonia has a Bachelor of Arts in Geography and a Master of Urban Environmental Planning. She is a registered professional planner with the Ontario Professional Planners Institute and the Canadian Institute of Planners. She has worked on a variety of planning and development projects related to policy, zoning, official plans, amendments, minor variances, consents, condominiums, subdivisions, and secondary plans like the Masonville Secondary Plan. And I'll introduce Shawna as well before we get to all of our speakers. Shawna Chambers is the Division Manager of Stormwater Engineering for the City of London. She has a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Waterloo, specializing in water resources and environmental engineering, as well as a diploma of public administration from Western University. As division manager, her team focuses on delivering effective stormwater infrastructure programs to benefit both the natural environment and the greater community. Shawna is committed to sustainability, innovation, and challenging the way it's always been done. And John de Benedictis is the Canadian Facilities Director with the TD Bank Group based out of the London office. John's current role is to manage and operate TD's Canadian domestic real estate network covering over 12 million square feet in over 1,200 locations, housing more than 50,000 employees. John played a major role in developing TD's original environmental sustainability strategy, which has since led to TD being a carbon neutral organization today. Currently, John is responsible for ensuring the bank's real estate footprint aligns to that strategy for all of North America. John also spearheaded the development and construction of the TD Green Energy Park located across from Masonville Mall, which you'll hear about more during this session. And now I'd like to welcome all of our guests to take a few minutes to share their perspective on tonight's topic. And then we'll move to our conversation before we take questions from the audience. So I'll invite Sonia to come and share what she has to say to you tonight. I'll welcome Sonia Wise.
Thank you very much, Joanna. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for everyone that helped make today possible, and also everyone that's attending. So hopefully you can see that now. I'll be speaking about the Masonville Secondary Plan. But first I wanted to take a step back and just really highlight what the link is between land use and sustainability. And when I say land use, I mean really how we use land, how we get around, where we live, work, and play. So a good example is to look at some of the historical trends that we've seen in planning and how they've helped shape or influence our cities of today. One really good example is the rise of the private automobile. So as more and more people owned cars, there's more and more planning that went into cities around cars, and it led to a really auto-centric sort of land use pattern. What we see is the impacts today. So more land is actually used for highways and roads. There's more traffic and congestion, longer commute times, but there's also collective impacts on air quality and things like greenhouse gas emissions. So with more cars, there's also a more spread out development pattern. This is the rise of the suburbs. This has created continued pressure for continued spread out developments. We also call it urban sprawl. So this can result in kind of monotonous residential areas, but it also perpetuates the need for private vehicle ownership, as these tend to be farther away from destinations like workplaces or shopping, and also tend to have infrequent transit services because of their locations. So this type of development pattern also required a lot more land for housing, and that pushed back the edge of the urban areas of cities. And this places a lot of pressure on agricultural lands and natural areas at the edge of cities. So this is a kind of an interesting perspective of Masonville in the 1950s. You can see a lot of fields and open spaces in the intersection of Fanshawe and Richmond there. And this is how much it's changed in the past 70 or so years. So just really wanted to highlight the decisions from the past have really shaped our present cities. And similarly, the decisions that we make today are going to shape the future of our cities. So let's look at London. We know that London is growing. So by the year 2035, it's projected to have a population of 458,000. That's an increase of 77,000 from 2015. We know that the household size in London is changing. So more than 60% of Londoners live alone or with only one other person. The way people are getting around is changing. So transit ridership in London has grown by 84%. In 1996, there was just over 12 million rides taken. In 2011, there was just under 23 million rides taken. And an interesting fact, only 5% of land in Canada is considered prime agricultural land. But when you look at London, about 80% of the lands that were annexed in 1993 are considered prime agricultural lands. So we have a really important resource right on our doorstep. So we know we're growing. What's our approach? Well, we are going to plan for it. So we take our direction from the province. We create an official plan that would implement that direction. For us, it's called the London Plan. And in certain cases, we create secondary plans for parts of the city. And these function the exact same way as official plan policies, but they have a more specific set of focus for an area. And that's what the draft Masonville Secondary Plan is. So looking at the London Plan, it has a real focus on managing growth inwards and upwards rather than sprawling outwards. It has all land in the city has a place type, and that's based on how it will or won't develop. There are 4 transit villages identified in the London Plan, and the Masonville is the transit village for the north. So what that means is that transit villages are second only to the downtown in terms of their intended function as high density, mixed use, vibrant and exciting urban centers. So you can think of it like a mini downtown. And it has this sort of intense form of development planned because it'll be integrated with the best levels of transit service going forward. So this is a really strategic and deliberate way to align land use and transit. Since Masonville as the north terminus of the future rapid transit line. And this will help implement the objective from the London Plan of 115,000 people living within a 10-minute walk of London's proposed rapid transit lines. So the draft Masonville Secondary Plan itself, this is the first secondary plan for a transit village. The plan area, this is located in the north of the city. The plan area contains about 89 hectares of land or 220 acres. It extends from Plane Tree Drive in the north to Shavian and Sunnyside in the south, from the Masonville Public School in the west to about the Uplands Trail in the east. And you can see them all in the middle there for some context. In a nutshell, the secondary plan is really intending to look at these underutilized spaces that are not very active and a little bit dead, and transform them into something that's more active, more vibrant, and overall a better and more efficient use of land. So this will be achieved through things like land use. So in certain cases, for the yellow, those are areas that will be preserved as existing low-rise residential neighborhoods. But for the orange areas, that's the vast majority of the lands in the plan area. And these are identified to have a very wide range of different types of uses. So commercial uses, residential, mixed use, community facilities, institutional, entertainment and recreational uses. The plan also focuses the highest development forms permitted. So the red area in the center around the intersection of Fanshawe and Richmond, that's a height maximum up to about 15 stories or 22 stories of bonusing. And then there's a gradual step down to the orange areas as a mid-rise form, which is up to about 8 stories. And then to a low-rise form, which is the yellow areas up to about 4 stories. So the idea is to provide a choice for different high, low, and mid-rise forms, and then transition effectively between them. There's also a focused area where ground floor commercial uses would be required. That's shown as the red area there. And in the photo, you can see the base of those buildings are occupied by businesses. And that creates a feet on the street where pedestrian movements are in and out of the shops and that activates the ground floor and the street. There's also new connections that are proposed through the plan area. So these are intended to break up some of those really large commercial blocks and make it easier to move around. In some cases, there are no pedestrian connections between buildings and sidewalks. In some cases, they're provided kind of as an afterthought. And what we want to do is really create more delineated spaces for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists, and also introduce new opportunities for tree planting and landscaping. And also to enhance the existing features in the area, like the Uplands Trail. There's new park spaces proposed. So with more people, we are anticipating the planning for 3 new parks. These would be located in the northeast, northwest, and southeast quadrants. And as the transit comes to this part of the city, we really want to focus on the transit station as a hub and celebrate it through building orientation and have it a really exciting place to be and very accessible for pedestrians. So how does this all contribute to sustainable growth? First and foremost, it combines land use and transit, and this provides a convenient car-free option for lots of people that will be living in the area. It creates more live-work opportunities in a more compact form. So this is integrating housing and employment options near each other, and also providing a range of goods and services that are in a walkable distance for residents. It'll provide more spaces for tree planting, open spaces, landscaping, and better stormwater management, which you'll hear about in a minute. And overall, the plan will facilitate a more complete community that is balanced with places to live, work, and recreate, instead of just being a major shopping destination. So all of these aspects are intended to work together to effectively manage growth in the city and in this area. This is done in a sustainable way through the efficient use of land, resources, and available infrastructure in the area. So the draft Masonville Secondary Plan, it's open for comments, and we want to hear what you think. The website's the best place to get involved. You can also email me, and my contact details are on there. And again, just a big thank you to everyone that made this possible and everyone that's attending. And I look forward to any questions coming up later. Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. That's terrific. Great visuals as well to get an idea of what you're describing. And the link that Sonia showed as well, you'll see it in the chat too, if you want to go directly to that link for the secondary plan, but her email is there as well. Terrific. Okay, so now we're going to welcome Shawna Chambers to come in. Shawna, as I had mentioned, the Division Manager of Stormwater Engineering for the city. And I welcome you now to start your presentation. Thanks, Shawna.
No problem. Thank you, Joanna. Okay, hope you can see my screen. So welcome to my discussion about rain gardens, stormwater management, the future of Masonville, to greener roads and beyond. A little thing from Toy Story, I think, Infinity and Beyond. Here we are. So we're going to just go through what is stormwater. Can welcome to my world, so to speak. Masonville Creek itself, we'll see where it is, what it is. And then green infrastructure, some of the pieces we want to integrate into the secondary plan for it to be more sustainable, as Sonia had mentioned. And then how can I help? How can you as a resident help your area to be better from a stormwater point of view and water quality to your rivers? This is an example of a project we did in basically near the forks of the river at Adelaide and Wellington there, and it just kind of makes it a more sustainable creek outlet. So stormwater, what are we talking about? Basically, whenever we develop land, we create more and more stormwater. This goes back to some science lessons when we were in high school about water balance, basically. We see on our left a situation of trees and high grasses, which have a high sponge ability, if you will. It soaks up water when the rain hits. You get a lot of absorption from the grasses and trees, and you also get quite a lot of evapotranspiration as well. Only 10% runoff. That means only 10% of the water that falls on the ground is actually taking off and creating flooding, essentially, or going to streams. But when we develop the land, we end up increasing that runoff significantly, 55% runoff that we have to manage so that it doesn't flood people downstream. Only 10% infiltration, 30% evapotranspiration. So it just becomes a totally different regime for the water, and we struggle kind of to manage it so that we don't have downstream impacts on others, be it flooding or in water quality, which we'll talk a bit about. So how do we manage this runoff that's created through all the new development? Basically, from the 1900s, we're going way back to the present. We have large storm sewers. There are under most of the roads in the City of London carrying water when it rains. But as of the late 90s, we moved into ponds, and you will see in these suburban areas that we have some large, they are human-made, engineered facilities to manage flooding and to improve the water quality to some extent. Basically, road runoff can go in there and you get some sediment from the road that settles out in the pond, thus saving the downstream water course from more road salts, or not so much salts, but grit and debris. And then we are moving into a new era. We are moving into an era of green infrastructure, which is low impact development. And we see an example here from Waterloo Street. Basically, that means we are trying to create sponge-like systems that soak up into the ground. So just a little bit more about these systems and what they actually do. The theory was with those sewers is that get the water away as quickly as possible, hit those inlets in the road, go down the street, and get rid of the rain. It's not really a resource, it's just a nuisance. Then we get into this situation of the ponds. Is basically we're trying to slow things down. We're still not doing anything with the water, just taking it all to one place. And now what we're trying to do is soak it into the ground so that we don't have so much runoff. If we can even prevent 10% of the runoff from going downstream, it can really improve some of the things that happen with our water quality. So Mesaville Creek, when we did the poll earlier, 30% of folks knew where it was, 70% did not. It's no surprise because this is one of the smallest watersheds in London, and the creek is only 2 kilometers in length, where it shows itself, so to speak. And it flows to the North Branch of the Thames River near Western. A little bit more about it in a sense. Because it was urbanized in the 1960s to the 1990s type of idea, we see that the creek, what it plays peekaboo, basically. We've got the creek, we see the headwaters in the north. There's a bit of wetland complex there as well. You get the nice headwaters, and then, it goes into a pipe. This scale is a little bit hard to see, but basically it follows in the storm sewer network all the way until it gets here, where we see a green patch and it emerges again. So there's not a lot of exposed creek, but from what is left, can be an amenity to provide a bit of a naturalization to the Masonville area. Because there's so many hard surfaces in Masonville, there is a lot of runoff. So limited water quality controls as well, just because of the era that it was built out in. This is just common for this type of development, that we would be piping creeks. That happens a lot. And then we just see it kind of show itself at the end there. This creek itself has signs of erosion and deterioration, just given that it's receiving a lot of heavy flow when it happens during large rain events. So 217 hectares of land, kind of a small watershed by all points considered. So the secondary plan, though, it creates some opportunities to improve some of the water quality and downstream erosion, because not only does Mesaville Creek receive the flows, but also then the North Branch of the Thames. So anything we can do in Masonville also benefits the Thames River. So here we see a couple of examples of what we'll discuss here is some green infrastructure to create some green roads, essentially. And it basically will improve water quality and erosion to the water system, if you will, and also provides a bit of a buffer to traffic for people as they're walking, and leads them to potentially some of those green park spaces. So 2 examples here. If anyone's been to the Boston Community Center, that's a really good example of basically a lot of rain gardens in a parking lot, which is really nice to see, and at Fire Hall 11 in Lambeth as well. So green infrastructure, what is it? It is meant to mimic nature, to promote infiltration and get water back into the groundwater table, and also to reduce erosion to downstream water courses, and improve water quality. So it has a lot of nice little features. It's not really meant to manage large flooding events by any means, but it's kind of for those smaller rain events where we can kind of prevent erosion from happening. And erosion is always created from the smaller rain events, kind of those day-to-day events over time that slowly basically break down the banks of a channel. So here's a couple of rain gardens that we actually built on Waterloo Street in Soho. And when I say Soho, it's basically the area south of Horton and east of Wellington there. And so we did this pilot project to see if we wanted to build our own rain gardens, what would happen. So effectively the idea being that you have the rain enter from the road into these curb cuts, we call them. Instead of having kind of like a closed curb network, you have them open and they go into these grates, and these ditch type areas can fill up and create a little bit, slow down the water, and also soak into the ground also through these rain gardens. These ones are quite landscaped, so I think they look attractive, and kinds of provides a unique road look for this particular street. So I'm going to just share a video with you about rain gardens, just a brief video.
Rain gardens are one way stormwater is managed in our neighborhoods. Rain gardens collect water from rooftops, driveways, and roads, which may carry pollutants. The rocks, plants, and shrubs have an important job of slowing down and filtering the rainwater. They aren't just nice looking, but useful. These gardens help the ground soak up an extra 30% of water, which makes neighborhoods better at managing all rainwater. It means less flooding, less erosion of the Thames River banks, and better water quality in the Great Lakes. You can even build one at your own home. Want more info? Visit london.ca/raingarden.
Okay, so that's just our promo video on our rain gardens. We also have a pamphlet that's available on our website, kind of gets into more of the nitty-gritty, if you will, about benefits of a rain garden and kind of how they work and the underground structures that are involved, kind of overflow pipes, different things if you're interested. And we created our own little mascot called Filter Phil. He's just kind of a fun guy who's, you know, kind of based on SpongeBob, but not. But we wanted to kind of highlight the different layers of the rain gardens, with the rock layer, the different enhanced soil layers, and the vegetation on top being his cool hair. So we did create that kind of as an outreach piece. We were trying to get the message out there to get these rain gardens, and a couple of schools have worked with the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority to build some rain gardens at the schoolyards, kind of thus continuing to promote what rain gardens are and their benefits. There he is there. So summary, I guess, that those rain gardens we're trying to put in the Masonville Secondary Plan. They're intended to soak up the rainwater, reduce the need for watering or irrigation, reducing the runoff to Mesaville Creek and the Thames River, mitigating heat island, and I'm calling it kind of like breadcrumbs, leading people to the green areas, if you will. So we would use green roads to lead to green areas. What can we do to help Masonville Creek and water resources in general? In your yard, you can install a rain garden, you know, follow our website and see what it's all about. Just planting trees and shrubs is amazing. It increases that ability for water to absorb those large rain events. Less hardscaping. We're seeing a big trend in people really loving the concrete, particularly pools, and then just hard concrete around the entire yard. And the more soft space, the better. And of course, minimizing use of fertilizers and pesticides. That's really, for water quality point of view, all of our fertilizers go to Lake Erie eventually, and that's where we see those large algae blooms. And, you know, that's kind of a separate talk altogether, but, you know, limiting the use of nutrients in our grasses really helps the water bodies as well. So further to that, rain down the drain. Please do not put anything down those drains in the road, paint, chemicals, etc. Phosphate-free soaps to wash your car or wash your car on the grass. Of course, using in also the commercial car washes are good as well. Draining your pools and hot tubs when they're free of the chlorine or bromine or what have you, letting them settle out. These are all important things that we can do as individuals to help the water resources system. So yeah, come and check out our pilot projects. I think we have some of those on our website, but if you're driving around, you may look at the boulevard and say, that looks like not a typical just grassed boulevard. There's something more going on. You know, basically Sonia Road west of Wonderland, we put some rain gardens in there. In the Oak Ridge neighborhood, Waterloo Street's probably our hallmark one, if you will. It's the most beautiful one that we have. And the Boston Community Center is also quite nice. Here I took the opportunity, when we opened up Fire Hall 11 in Lambeth, one of the new fire halls, we'd built a rain garden, and then their mascot, Archie the fire dog, what a guy. He was posing elegantly for our rain garden shoot as well. So if you have any questions, we have our website, we have my contact information there, and it's kind of just meant to be a brief overview of stormwater management. So of course, if you ever have any interest or questions, our group is there to help you. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Shawna. That was terrific. Yeah, love the mascot. Right. So now we'll go to John with the TD Bank Group, and John's going to share some other exciting things happening in the Masonville area. So I'll turn it over to you. But one moment, I forgot to say, if you have any questions, I'm noticing them showing up in the Q&A. I did forget to mention that. So please, if you have any questions throughout, put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them after our conversation with all the speakers. But now I'll hand it over to John. Thanks, John.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. So I am John Benedictis. I'm with TD Bank. I'm going to walk you through our TD Green Energy Park. Some of you I heard based on the survey are familiar or have been there. I think about a third, and 2/3 haven't. So hopefully this is an education for those who haven't. And for those who have, I think you may learn a few things that may surprise you as well. So where is it? Obviously it's behind the TD branch at Masonville across from Masonville Mall. What you're seeing here is a schematic presentation image that we did in 2010 when we developed the idea of building a green energy park. There's certain things about this park that you're going to find somewhat unique, and you'll see some of the bullets there that I'll go through in detail as we go through the presentation. Next slide. So there's an image of where it is, kind of surrounded by an urban commercial designated area, residential to the south, and a school to the west of that. So really kind of a unique pocket within a jurisdiction within Masonville. This is what the branch looks like today. For those of you who are driven by are probably familiar with it. It's a residential looking building with parking in the front, and in the back there's this parquet that existed there for many years when we built the branch back in the 80s. This is what it looked like. So you'll see there's some mature trees, some landscape berms, and the commercial property just to the north of that image. This is a rendering of kind of what we thought we wanted to do with the park. We said, well, we didn't want to knock down trees, but we wanted to incorporate some sustainable features in the park and take the natural vegetation into our design criteria. So you'll see kind of some renderings here of kind of our thought process as we went through it, of what it could look like, what the art of possibility was in terms of creating a sustainable park. Then we decided, well, let's go ahead and do it. So in 2010, we went ahead to our leaders and said, we have an idea. Even though in Cypress, Florida, TD built a brand new branch that was net zero, of course, Florida being a lot of sun, it was somewhat easier to do in terms of generating net zero and solar capacity of energy. We thought, well, let's do something north of the border, but let's make it more challenging. Let's find an existing site, an existing branch, and do it with our climactic conditions. So we presented to our executive, they gave us approval, and this is some images you're going to see of the construction of taking that park and converting it to a sustainable park. You'll see we try to keep all the trees and everything around it, and yet we're still mobilizing large equipment and bulldozers and so on. And you'll see some images here that are somewhat unique. So this is a small concrete pad that you see in the image here for the solar structure, the solar amphitheater you'll see shortly. But the solar trackers, which are the larger structures that you see in the background there, the footings on those are 10 feet wide, 10 feet long, and 4 feet high. Like they're quite large. And the reason that is there's quite a wind load on these solar trackers. When the wind does strike them, obviously it's got to have a stability into the ground. So it is diverted into a large foundation that's completely reinforced with steel. Again, we had to build that while not destroying the landscape in terms of the trees that were already mature and surrounding the property. So you see some other images. It wasn't the best time of year to be doing it, given that it was quite soft and a lot of wet rain that particular season. But the teams did a fantastic job of working around without damaging all the other trees in the park. And you'll see we had to have large equipment, and you'll see that sort of spire in the background. That's part of the stem of what they call the solar tracker. So that's the part that gets embedded into the ground and anchored, almost like a pylon type of sign. And then the solar tracker gets fastened on top of that. But this is where the mechanics and the guts are buried. There's a little motor on the top that allows it to rotate. Now, what does it look like completed? So we're going to walk you through some images of what the park looks like at the time of completion. Since then, landscaping has certainly become a lot more mature, but you'll get an idea of kind of what the park is. So it is a sustainable park. So all the landscaping you see is local and drought tolerant. There is no irrigation systems here. We use limestone pathways, so it doesn't create weeds. It does have some crushed recycled rubber tires underneath there as well. Some of the signage that we use, that earlier sign you saw, the TD Drainage Park, that was made from an old door that we laser cut into the sign. Throughout the park, you'll see little signs like this that talk about the planting that's there. It identifies the plant in a Latin term, the common term, and a description, and where in real life that plant was used. So it might say this plant was used in the manufacturing of denim or cotton. It's a great educational feature for people who want to walk through the park and determine how some of these plantings were actually used for other repurposing. Of course, it's going to have bike stations. We certainly promote that. So you'll see that there, and you'll see the limestone pathway. And again, you'll see that sort of laser cut wood, recycled wood sign in the background as well. And this is kind of what the solar tracker looks like. Now, what's unique about the solar tracker is they do follow the sun's rotation, so it's always perpendicular to the sun. It also has some intelligence built into it. So what happens is in the morning, it starts in the east, it gets up, it follows the sun to the west. Once the sun sets, it goes to what they call a tabletop setting. And then the tabletop setting overnight rotates back to its easterly base, still in tabletop mode. And then it knows when to wake up to match the perpendicular orientation of the sun. And all three follow each other exactly. We commonly refer to them as Larry, Curly, and Mo, because Mo has the brains in the middle and the other two follow exactly the same. It also has intelligence built into it that if there's a severe windstorm, if they detect wind for more than 80 kilometers an hour for more than 10 seconds in duration, it will automatically go to tabletop mode, all three of them, for safety reasons. It's thinking there's some sort of heavy winds, this could cause some damage, I will automatically go to safety mode. In addition to that, if there's heavy snow load in a particular time of year, if that is the case, it also decides, hey, there's too much weight on me, I go completely vertical, it slides the snow off of it, and once it realizes the weight is gone, it goes back to its default setting. So a lot of intelligence built into it. You'll see there's signage throughout the park, both on ground signs. Anything landscaping is mounted on the ground. Anything that's vertical is mounted on the post, and you'll see various signage and some education of how it works and what it is. There's also a solar portico. So this is a structure that we built above the parking surface area that does have electric car charging center. You see there, it's used quite frequently. In fact, it's used more at night and weekends than it is during the day for our customers, which is fantastic because it's allowing our community to use it as well. And it's used quite frequently. We also monitor the usage of not only the energy park, but of the electric charging center. So we know at any time when it's being used, we know the profile of what days are the most common, what hours of the day, and how long people are using it for as well. And there's an image of what the solar parking structure looks like. Again, landscaping is beautiful, and there's no irrigation that we have in place that makes it look like that. It's all natural, drought-tolerant materials. This is an image of the solar amphitheater. So knowing there's a school next door, we decided to sort of partner with the school and not only sort of help with the educational signs that you see for the landscaping, but we created a solar amphitheater designed at sort of younger demographic height. So you look at the rocks that are there, the students can sit on them. They do have outdoor classes here as well. The park is Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi equipped. That little sign that you see on the right does have power. So if a teacher or someone wants to do a presentation or bring a microphone out or speakers, they can plug into an outlet and use power. And it is used quite regularly. Here's an example of one of the classes that's been out there sort of studying and taking some lessons off of the various signage and then regrouping back at the amphitheater where the teacher can go through instructional advice or guidance. So we're quite proud of the use. And there's an image of particular, I think this is 2 classes on a particular day many years ago that was out there. You'll also notice that that surface there with the sun, it's actually pointing directly due north with sort of the TD branded color of a rainbow throughout that. That surface is actually rubber. It's not concrete. It's rubber, and it's made from crushed recycled product as well. So it's soft. Kids can actually sit on the ground, and it's quite soft for them as opposed to a hard concrete surface, which is not really in alignment with what was just mentioned earlier. So that's it. We're quite proud of the TD Drainage Park. We encourage people to go out there. We do know people use it on their own. We've had university students out there for classes. We have Fanshawe students out there for classes. We've had people from symphonies and bands go out there and use the amphitheater to play music. So if you've never visited, please do so. And if you have, we certainly welcome any positive or other comments you have for the park as well. So with that, I'll turn it back to Joanna.
Thank you, John, very much. That was wonderful. So nice to see those examples. So now I will welcome all of our speakers back, Sonia and Shawna, and we'll have John with us still. I'm seeing some questions come in. That's great. Continue to post your questions in the Q&A. We're happy to get to them after this segment, where I'm just going to be asking a few questions to all of our guests today, just to get a bit more detail on some of what they presented. But definitely we're looking forward to answering your questions in a little bit as well. All right, let's start with Sonia. So Sonia, in relation to the secondary plan, will it be the city that develops the land?
Thank you. It's a common question we get. I think anytime we're talking about a plan, we're always saying, you know, what we're planning for. But in this case, the city's role is really just to create the direction for future development in the area. So it would still be up to private landowners to decide where, when, and if they develop. But how that would occur would have to be in accordance with this plan. So it would sort of proactively set out, you know, all of the standards we want to see, all of the connections through multiple properties, and then that would have to be implemented on a site-by-site basis through private development.
Okay, thank you. And what's the timeline for the development to take place?
So this is definitely a high growth part of the city that we're planning for, and it's looking for the next 25 years plus. So it's a fair amount of development. We know it's not going to happen overnight, but we do know that the planning horizon, or the sort of time frame we're looking for, is about 25 years in the future.
Okay, thanks very much. All right, Shawna, I'll ask you now the next question. So what, you had talked about those low impact development features, the rain gardens, yes? And so what started that process? Why did London start installing those?
Actually, it's as recent as 2015 where the province they sent out a memo to all municipalities basically stating that we should start looking at incorporating low impact development, is what it's kind of called in the industry. It is green infrastructure, things that basically soak up the water instead of just building the ponds. So it's something that a lot of the municipalities we've all been starting to do, and it's you know, it's only been 6 years, so we're learning a lot and doing a lot of pilot projects.
Yeah, and so how does London compare with other municipalities who are using these same kind of systems, a low impact development?
We're actually one of the leading municipalities for incorporating these. We updated our design standards in 2019 to include it in our documents. We've also done at least 10 pilot projects. And so we're basically viewed in the province as one of the leaders of stormwater management for these as well.
That's terrific. And I was glad you gave the examples so people can go and visit and look at the different styles. All right, so John, I'm going to ask you a few questions too in relation to what you shared about the Green Energy Park. So was there anything you learned from this project that you applied to other locations in TD?
Yeah, great question. So we do actually have another location in London at Wonderland in Southdale that's also a LEED certified building, and it's got solar panels on the roof. It's got the electric charger there as well. So we have used it in other locations. That one happens to be leased versus the one that I just showed you, which is owned. So we try to partner with landlords, knowing that a good portion of our network is leased. And so that was a learning for us. And since then, we tried to replicate that with other landlords across the country. So we're putting in more sustainable features. We're doing far more LEED type design construction, a lot more sort of, you know, drought tolerant landscaping, and even the sort of operating practices of the landscape contractor, what types of chemicals they are or aren't using to snow plow and so on, and lack of and the right types of drought tolerant landscaping and the maintenance practices. So we've taken the park as sort of an incubator, and we've applied many elements to really the whole network, not just in Canada, but even parts of the US.
That's terrific. Thanks. And so you gave the example of schools that can visit the park and take advantage of the space and the opportunities for learning. What else has happened in Masonville in terms of people using the space or benefiting from what you're offering?
Yeah, we've got, I mean, certainly we get a lot of customer feedback. Some customers who come to the branch don't even know the park's there until they see it and start asking questions. So it's created a lot of conversation. Ironically, it's created conversation into opening up TD Green FEF accounts, Friends of the Environment accounts, which it's an unintended consequence, but we certainly love people supporting sustainability efforts. But it really engages conversations for us. So TD is a carbon neutral organization. We have been since 2010. So we love to hear feedback from our customers. You know, what can we do differently? How can we become more sustainable? So that's been fantastic. And then certainly what I mentioned earlier about the use of electric car chargers, you know, having feedback, knowing that more of our neighborhood residents are using it versus our customers, which is fantastic. And so now as we think about rolling these out, and we've done many more in BC, we've contemplated, well, these could be focused not just in commercial nodes, like we do with Wonderland and Southdale, but let's figure out how we can incorporate them in areas that abut residential neighborhoods, because they'll use them as well. And so that's, we change our thinking about positioning of electric car chargers going forward.
That's great. Thanks, John. So Sonia, I just have another question for you. And I see we have more questions coming in too, which is great. Thanks. Please feel free to continue to add your questions in the Q&A. We'll get to them right after this segment. So Sonia, you mentioned the phrase growing inwards and upwards, if I got that right. So why is that more aligned with a sustainable development outcome?
So first and foremost, it better utilizes existing infrastructure. So that means everything from sewers to community facilities. It really protects the rural and agricultural areas as there's less pressure for urban expansion if more of the housing demand is captured within and up in the city. And it also provides more walkable options. So for things like shopping, work, recreation, everything's in a convenient distance where you don't have to hop in a car all the time. And that type of compact development really creates more complete communities. So you have pretty much everything you need right at your fingertips, and all of those together create a really sustainable type of outcome.
Yeah, thank you. And so if there have been recent applications for development in the area, how would those be handled as part of the secondary plan?
So this area definitely has had some development interest in the past couple of years. Any type of recent approval, and recent is 5 to 10 years, anything that's received recent municipal planning approval would be carried forward, simply to recognize how much community consultation and deliberation went into those development applications. So this is the secondary plan is looking forward, but it does recognize the existing permissions afforded to those sites.
Great. All right, thanks so much. All right, we'll move on to Shawna, and then we'll talk to John, and then we'll go to our next segment. But Shawna, I just have a few questions for you too. So how is London preparing for climate change when it comes to managing frequent and intense storm events?
Essentially, our group, Stormwater Engineering, has been preparing for climate change for more or less the last 10 years, doing studies, trying to figure out how much more intense, how much more frequent are these storm events. And that's kind of the puzzling question that there's a lot of modeling going on internationally about how much we're going to have to deal with. But long story short, we're trying to just build resilient infrastructure. So, the pipes that I mentioned earlier, the storm sewers, they're only designed to carry kind of your everyday rain event. Where things really hit the road, so to speak, is where does the water go once the pipes are full? And we call those overland flow routes. So through our climate change adaptation strategy, we're really looking at where does the water go when the pipes are full, when it's flowing over the ground, who's going to get flooded. And so we're studying that quite extensively. That's one element. And the other element is kind of updating our flood lines as well along the rivers and the water courses. So kind of more information if people are interested. Our group is doing all types of work like that. But just, I guess, everyone to know that we are working on climate change initiatives for the city, and it's something that we take quite seriously about trying to protect people from flooding, basically.
Yeah, thanks, Shawna. And you talked a bit about this when you talked about the ponds as well, and a bit about the overflow, but what's the impact of uncontrolled rainwater on the water quality of streams? So
basically we have no stormwater management effectively. It's just that runoff that I spoke about earlier, the 50% runoff is just flowing freely. So when it hits a water course, it kind of hits as like a torrent, and it can really, break down banks if they're just, earthen streams and channels. And we see this through the Thames River. We see this on other creeks, Medway Creek, Stony Creek, where you'll see banks just incised because of the strong force of flow. So that's kind of what happens on uncontrolled rainwater, and that's our ultimate goal, is to protect the water courses at the end of the day, in addition, well, of course, to property.
Great, thanks so much. All right, well, I have a few last questions for John. And so John, the park, if you could talk more about who is using it. You mentioned the school nearby, but do people outside of London come to use it as well?
Yeah, I mean, there have been, certainly we've gotten some insight through our branch employees of who's using it. There is no reservation system, certainly, but we encourage anybody to come out and use it during the day or weekends. But we've had groups from out of town. We've had engineering groups. We've had certain industry associations come out and actually have meetings outside when it's weather permitting. Certainly we've had other schools that come out on occasion, not as a whole class, but portions of class we know has been out there as well. And we know some residents certainly use it quite a bit, and people walk their dogs and do all that type of thing as well. And I know we even had some sports teams out there. Now they're not playing soccer, that kind of stuff, but they use it for team meetings. I don't know last year with COVID how that kind of worked, but we do know that some organizations used it for that purpose, is just to go out and tour someplace somewhat unique, somewhat different. And then when they're done, they can go shopping and go nearby to other commercial locations. So it's a multi-purpose park. I mean, we're so proud of it being there. Part of the foundation of Masonville, which we've been there for so long. In fact, we built the branch before a lot of the stuff was built around it. So it's kind of a home place for us. And we're just so excited it's there. And we just encourage many people to go out and use it as much as they can. So
that's terrific. Thanks, John. I'll mention something else. And you had mentioned it just to me earlier about not the Masonville branch, but another location and something unique that you're doing with air conditioning. Do you feel like you can share that story?
Sure. Yeah. So going back to the Southdale and Wonderland branch, which is right outside the Home Depot, in addition to doing the sustainable things, and it is a LEED. In fact, it was one of the first LEED for existing buildings in Canada when we took it over in terms of doing the conversion to an existing building. So that's how far it predates LEED. And since then, we actually have over 150 locations throughout North America that have some sort of LEED designation. But in terms of one of the unique features that we put in behind that branch, and you'll see it if you ever drive by, there's like a little fenced area. Well, inside that fenced area is a giant tank of water. And what happens is that tank of water gets frozen into ice. And in the summertime, that sort of cool air is released into the branch during the day. So we're not actually using the air conditioning. We're using that sort of cool air coming off that big slab of ice to run the air conditioning system. And then at night, when hydros or electricity is more hydro driven and there's no peak demands, that regenerates itself. It freezes at night when electricity is less expensive, less impactful to the environment. And that process repeats itself during the day. And if you ever open this thing up, it looks like a giant coiled mattress with some refrigerant running through it. And this thing just refreezes the water on a 24/7 basis. And it's fantastic. It's called an ice bear. That's the trade name, but it's thermal ice storage is another word that people might recognize.
That's great. Thanks. I was glad you could share that. I just think it's an interesting story. We're going a bit away from Masonville, but I think it speaks to the focus and the philosophy you have with your properties. So thanks so much. All right, it is time. So what we're going to do is open it up to your questions. I see we have a nice amount of them in there. The first one looks like it's going to Shawna. And I think there's a bit of a typo, but I think I've got it. What is the purpose of the first grate in the rain garden? So in that image, there was a grate, I think, after that cut curb. If you could talk about the purpose of that.
Yes, Joanna, if I may, I think I'll go back to the diagram.
Sure.
Because I kind of had that open. So here it's mimicking a lot what we saw in that photograph that was above here, this grate situation and this item here. So when the water comes into the road, this is actually, it does have a closed bottom, and what happens is it fills up and allows any of the sediment and grit coming off of the road to kind of sink down into what we call like a pre-treatment device, basically. So, the road sands and all that type of debris, and you'll see here it's collecting leaves and whatnot. So it kind of pre-treats, and then you'll see that it's a little bit cleaner going into here. So it's just trying to get that heavy sediment, because if sediment gets into this main drainage bed, it'll start to clog, and it won't work. So you see here it comes in, this is a pre-treatment device, then it goes over top and fills up here until you reach the elevation of the overflow structure, and then it goes into, most times in London, it goes into a pipe. If you had sand soils, you don't need this overflow pipe. We very rarely have sand soil in London. But anyway, that's kind of how it works.
Yeah,
I go on all day talking about rain gardens. You just go on.
No, that's very clear. I like the image that you used first. All right, this one looks like it's for you, Sonia. So there's a comment about the idea of the increased density that you had mentioned in places. And there's a question about the accommodation of additional students in schools. So talking about school capacity. So referring to Stony Brook Public School, Jack Chambers, catchment areas where high density infill is planned. So just, can you speak a bit to that density issue?
Sure. So I guess the first thing to keep in mind is that this is sort of a longer term planning horizon that we're looking at. So we keep our school boards in pretty constant communication for planning applications. And for this particular application, they get circulated the sort of launch or notice of application, as well as some of the interim steps, so that they know that this is coming. And also for Masonville, this entire area and the plan is really a refinement of the existing policies. So in 2016, the London plan was approved by council, and that's what had originally designated this whole area as a transit village. So even back in at that point, the school boards would have been aware of the London plan and the intentions for this area. So they should be able to incorporate, the trending demographics and the changing pupil population into their plans going forward.
Okay, thanks, Sonia. And this one looks like it is for, oh, where'd that go? Oh, there it is. So Shawna, it looks like this one's for you. Who maintains the rain gardens?
That's kind of a fun question. We, in our pilot projects, we're also kind of playing around with who is going to maintain them as well. So the fire station is maintained by the firefighters. They do their own lawn maintenance. So we kind of said, you guys, just kind of weed this garden. The Soho Waterloo Street ones are maintained originally by the Soho Community Group, and they'll have to forgive me because another community group is now maintaining them, which I lost the name of. And the ones in Oak Ridge residential neighborhood are maintained by the residents. So we're kind of playing around with who's going to maintain them. On the arterial roads, of course, is the city parks operations and sewer operations. We're trying to lessen the load on those folks, and also it gives other groups an opportunity to kind of give back to the community or kind of sustain these higher level gardens. So yeah, we're experimenting, and it's been a bit fun.
Okay, thanks, Shawna. All right, and it looks like the next one would be for Sonia. And this one is a comment about the Masonville area in terms of its commercial development and residential, and a question about bike lanes. Just saying that would be a great feature to see incorporated more. And again, this balance of the idea that there's heavy car traffic in the area and it might be uncomfortable for cyclists. Just to comment, it would be great to see space that welcomes biking more.
Yeah, that's a great comment. Great to hear. It's definitely something we want to achieve through those new connections in the plan area, so that it's not just, really large expanses of parking areas that people are getting through, but there's more clear spaces for pedestrians and cyclists. We are still, really accepting feedback and doing engagement at this time. So we're planning to go to the Cycling Advisory Committee later in April, I believe. And get their thoughts as well in terms of how we can, maximize the area for cycling and cyclists as well. But that's great to hear, yeah.
Great, thanks, Sonia. and I think this one's over to you, Sonia, as well, saying that Masonville, and I think they're referring to the mall here, Masonville Mall's parking lot seems like a great space to use green resources such as solar energy. That's the question.
Yeah, I think that's good to hear too. We, I guess, as planners, always look at those parking areas as opportunity sites for development or redevelopments. They, in general, just seem like underutilized space that could be better used. So solar is definitely something we'd encourage, and some of the plan policies do speak to green building design as well as green landscaping and that sort of thing. So also really good.
Perfect. That's great. All right, John, I think this one is for you. This one is about the solar panels by your branch. I'll just read it. Is it the solar panels that provide the power for the cars?
Great question. So maybe I'll sort of explain kind of where the energy goes in general, because it doesn't matter seasonally, obviously, in terms of how much sunlight we get. And the term they use is insolation versus insolation. So insolation is the amount of sunlight hours in a year, but essentially all the energy, especially on a July or August day during the summer, we actually have too much energy. So we actually have to turn energy back into the grid that the branch can't use itself. So we're feeding back into as a source supply back into one of the hydro grid system. But obviously at night, certain cold temperature weathers where there's no sun, a lot of snow, we're obviously taking electricity back from the hydro grid. So depending on the day, yes, it is being supplied by the solar panels, but it obviously depends on how much solar capacity is going on during the day. In terms of how much it generates per year, it would be equivalent to about 7 to 8 London households. That's how much energy is generated from the solar panels throughout the year. So it's quite a lot, but obviously it is cyclical depending on the time of day and the time of year.
Okay, thanks, John. And another one for you. Although, anyway, it might involve more than one person answering this. So what is the plan for the TD Bank site and property in the secondary plan? So maybe that is a Sonia question.
So all of the lands within the Masonville Secondary Plan have different direction for things like land use, for building height, and also for ground floor uses. So in this case, the range of uses wouldn't change much. It's still that sort of very wide range of commercial, retail, residential uses. The development potential would potentially increase a little bit. So it's really dependent on the appetite for redevelopment. As is, nothing would change as long as it stays the same. But if there was the interest in redeveloping it, then it could achieve higher densities. Basically how it is right now in terms of its use as a commercial building, that's exactly what we want to see on a main corridor. And that would be sort of fine with the plan.
Yeah, that's good. I don't think you would have anything to add to that, Shawna.
Yeah, the only thing I can maybe add to it is for those that have been to that branch or banks with TD, it's a very busy branch and there's not a lot of space. In fact, we've closed it for most parts of the COVID lockdown, just simply because we don't have the logistics inside to create the physical space separation. So we know it's a tight branch and it's a very busy branch. So we are looking at ways of how do we expand it so it meets the needs of our customers, but at the same time doesn't impact the parameters of the site or lose its residential look and feel of the branch itself. So we are looking at it and we're trying to figure out how do we meet the demands of our clients without impacting the footprint that's there as well.
Thank you for that. All right, we still have a little time for questions. So if someone does want to add any last question at this point, but I am going to read the one that's up next. So I'll just read it as it is. As a resident very close to the Masonville Mall, traffic flow at times of the year around the North Center Road travelway is almost impassable at certain times of the year. How will increasing the density in this area impact the surrounding residential areas not part of the secondary plan area? Over to you, Sonia.
So traffic and congestion is definitely something that we've heard as a hot button issue in the area. It's something that we're looking at as part of the plan, and we're actually doing a transportation impact study right now that should be finalized soon, and that will tell us more about the traffic patterns as they currently are and also what to expect going forward. But I think it's a really important exercise here to sort of rethink how we get around. And yes, it's important to plan for vehicles and our roads, but it's equally as important to look at other forms of transportation. So how do we connect more people to transit? How do we improve the cycling infrastructure so people don't have to take their cars and have an option? And how do we make things more walkable? So, you know, the pedestrian trip is the one that you would want to take more often. And I think those are all going to be kind of hand in hand with the density and redevelopment in the area. So hopefully that will shift the focus away and provides different options for people to get around.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Sonia. All right, so that concludes the, oh, stand by. We have one coming in. All right, we'll take this last one. Right, let me just read it here. Oh, I see. So there's just a comment there when you were mentioning traffic studies, Sonia, the idea of kind of pre and post pandemic in terms of the flow patterns and usages changing due to pandemic. But you were saying the study was going to be coming up.
No, that's a fair comment. We had the interruption of the pandemic, obviously, when we were undertaking the study. So the solution to that is that we took the previous pre-pandemic traffic data and then gave it a sort of increased markup so that that would be our live numbers. But it is a good point, and we will have to look at that going forward as well.
Great. Okay, thanks so much. All right, so now I'm going to invite all of you just to share a last comment, just anything that you want to say in conclusion, and then we'll go to a few last slides and wrap up our time tonight. So Sonia, I'll start with you just to share any last comments.
So again, just a big thank you to everyone that's come out and for everyone that put this on. The Masonville Secondary Plan is open. This is the best time to make comments. So if there's anything you want to see change in the area, or you know, if you don't think the plan has quite hit the right mark, let us know, let me know, and watch for the next steps of the plan process going forward. We should be bringing something back to council towards the end of spring, maybe early summer. But thanks again.
Thanks, Sonia. All right, Shawna, I'll ask you to share any last comments.
Yes, just to echo Sonia, really thanks everyone for coming out and listening. And I always love to share stories about stormwater management. And if the rain gardens resonated with you at all, yeah, I do encourage you to go to our website. There's quite a bit of information of how to build your own, or also to submit comments on the secondary plan and say, we love rain gardens. That can help push our agenda with, well, not agenda, but push our designs onto some of the development that might come forward.
That's great. Thanks. Yeah. All right, John, I will invite you to share any last comments now.
Yeah, no, just thank you to the audience. I mean, there's quite a number of folks that attended, so that's showing us that there's quite a passion of interest in this particular part of the city. For us, we've been there for a long time, so it is part of our DNA. We were there before a lot of development was around us, so having seen it grow and still be part of that neighborhood and seeing the interest from our residents is fantastic. Certainly the lockdown is a challenge for all of us, but it's a great opportunity to go out and visit the park, maintain your 6-foot distance, and just be out with a beautiful park and sustainable efforts as well. So we encourage people just to go out and visit it if you can.
That's great. Thanks so much. And thanks to all of you. Thanks for the information that you shared. Thanks for just making it so visual and memorable. Just great stories. And I'm really glad we could share them tonight with everyone here that joined us, and for the people that will see the video afterwards. And I should mention the video will be available through London Environmental Network, their YouTube as well as website. So I wanted to just conclude by saying thank you to everyone. We've had a Green in the City session unlike any other. We've had it in the winter and the spring this year, which normally we wouldn't do. And I think we've been able to tell some really terrific stories. And what I'd like to do, just again, a reminder that we will be back in the fall with our regular Green in the City series, with lots more stories to tell. But I just wanted to share a slide first, and this is about the Environmentalists and Residents program. So this is a program that's going to be starting April 1st, this Thursday, with our environmentalist in residence, Dr. Andrea Boyer. And the launch will be a preview of what we're doing. And we're going to have a new unpublished poem read by our local poet, Tom Cull, which we're very happy to have, as well as lots of prize giveaways. And as I say, a preview of all the things we're going to be doing throughout the month of April. This is a program made possible by the Houston Family Foundation with support from the City of London. So we're very happy to do that starting on Thursday. So please join us. You can go to the website there, lpl.ca/environmentalist, or call the library for registration. All right, that's my the promo there for our ongoing environmental content, and I will now hand it over to Leah.
Okay, thanks, Joanna. Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. It's been a really great session, really great series, and thanks to everyone who came out tonight. So I'm excited for this environmentalist in residence, but I'm just also going to plug a couple opportunities for you folks to get involved. So we've been talking a lot about environmental action and climate action throughout our Green in the City series. So I'd invite you all to visit the link here, also in the chat and in the follow-up email, to share your feedback on the City of London's Climate Emergency Action Plan. As well, the City of London created a climate action plan simulator with some folks from eDemocracy, and that kind of lets you go in and create your action plan for London and see kind of what needs to be done to reach the goal of net zero by 2050. So the link is there. The other thing you can do is check out our past Green in the City events by visiting our website, and stay tuned for the ones that are going to happen in the fall. But we do have like 10 videos of past recordings that you can check out through our website there. And lastly, I'd just like to thank the supporters of the London Environmental Network for supporting our work. And thank you to everyone, attendees and speakers, for coming out this evening. So really appreciate it. Hope you all enjoyed it.